What's up everybody and welcome back. As you probably read the title, this is my spoiler-free review of Castlevania Nocturne. What do I think about it? Well, just off the rip, I didn't enjoy it as much as the original Castlevania series. Does that mean that it's bad or that you shouldn't watch it? That's for you to decide. So let's just start off with the highlights. I think most of them should be pretty obvious. The art style is incredible again. The action is incredible again. The soundtrack is incredible again. Those are the obvious things, and I'm not gonna harp about them, mostly because they are obvious. That's kind of a given if you've seen the first Castlevania series. It's not like they would downgrade it. Maybe in some places they did downgrade the animation, in which it got a little choppy feeling. I don't know if that was a stylistic decision or a monetary one, but there were some moments, at least during some of the action scenes, where it looks like the budget wasn't completely there, which is a shame because they should have, I'm not going to say gotten an unlimited budget, but gotten a budget enough where they can basically make this look as beautiful as any Mappa piece ever made. Getting the obvious highlights out of the way, those are them. If those are all the things that you care about, well, they're there, not surprisingly. Middle tier stuff, I don't know what you would call them. There's highlights, there's lowlights. What's average light? I don't know. Middle tier things, Richter obviously isn't Trevor, and Maria and Annette are obviously no Sypha, which yeah, okay. I figured that was going to be the case. There's no surprise there. I liked Sypha much more than either of them. That's not to say that either of them are bad characters, because they're not. They're decent characters, pretty good characters, not bad, not Sypha. I don't think you're going to be disappointed with Richter or with either of them. Maybe you will. Maybe all you want is the original Castlevania just to keep going forever, and I understand that. I completely understand that, but that's not what this is. So Richter is obviously going to give you elements of Trevor, but he's not going to be Trevor. Same as Maria and Annette. They're not going to be Sypha, and they're not. Is that a bad thing? No. Is that one of the highlights of the series? Honestly, not to me, simply because I am comparing this with the original series, because this is a spin-off series, so I have to compare it with it. That's the only comparison that can be made. But I don't think it's a bad thing that they're different. They should be. It shouldn't be carbon copies or clones of the previous characters in this new thing. They didn't feel like highlights to me, like Trevor and Sypha and Alucard in the original series, where I was watching the show for them. They were the main selling point. This one, I felt like I was watching it because it was Castlevania. I wanted to see the action, I wanted to see the magic, I wanted to see the killing, I wanted to see this new story, less so than I wanted to see these new characters. And that was kind of my experience throughout this entire thing. I wasn't in love with the characters as much as I was with Trevor and with Sypha and with Alucard. It just wasn't there. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you what made them less. Main problems with this show. Because again, this show wasn't bad. It wasn't as good as the first one, and I wasn't as into it as I was the first one. But that doesn't mean it was a bad show. I don't think it was bad. But I definitely was not as excited about this one as I was about the original Castlevania, where, man, I just devoured that show. But the main problems with this series that I saw were really its pacing in the development of the villain. Mostly because the development of the villain was non-existent. We didn't really see it. We heard rumors of the villain, and then for the last 2 episodes-ish, we finally see the villain and we see her in all of her tremendous power. We're not given an explanation of why she has it, at least not in season 1, but there was no real threat or stakes. It didn't feel like there were any. When you watch the first series, one of the first scenes is Dracula destroying an entire city. And if you haven't seen the first series, I won't spoil why, but you see Dracula destroy an entire city like it's absolutely nothing. I mean, it is nothing. It was so easy for him. In this, We're not even heard rumors of what this villainess is capable of. All we hear is, oh yeah, she's strong, but we don't hear she destroyed a whole city. We don't see any of her actions until she finally pops up at the end, so the stakes don't feel like they're there. The only time it feels like there's stakes where a side villain is on the screen, all rocks. I can't even really say he's a villain because they're not even trying to stop him. He doesn't even show up till like halfway. There's no like, oh, we have to hunt this guy down, he's trying to do some evil stuff. No, he's just kind of used in the beginning for character development for Richter, but he's the only one that feels like it's a threat because we've seen him in action before. For villains to seem threatening, we have to see them do something that is threatening. This is why in a lot of movies where you get a real good villain, one of the first scenes is you see the villain decimating people because they want you to build up this assumption that this villain is unbeatable. But this whole show, we don't see the villain. All we do is we hear about a little bit of her. We don't hear about her feats of villainy. I mean, maybe you do, but they must have been so offhanded that I can't even remember off the top of my head what they were. So that is one of the major complaints that I have about this series, is that we go from knowing Dracula is so crazy OP and powerful, not because they say it and not because you know the lore of Dracula in the Castlevania sphere, but because we saw it firsthand. This villainess, you don't see anything until the end, and even when you see her at the end, because you don't see her against anybody else or against any other stronger opponents, I was watching it and saying out loud, man, Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard would have just pieced you up, dog, because I have no comparison to measure her strength to. You don't see it. All you know is that All Rocks and some other vampires who are seemingly strong, I don't even know how strong these vampires are afraid of her. That's not enough justification to me to make a villain intimidating or scary or make the stakes feel like these are real stakes like it felt in Castlevania. I think the other problem with that is the setting and how limited the setting is, because everything in season 1 takes place in one little town or one little city, whereas in the original Castlevania they went city to city, town to town, and everywhere was jacked up because of Dracula and his army. You don't get to see that. Everything seems kind of fine, but then we're supposed to be afraid of this villainess that we know absolutely nothing about. So that was disappointing, and that was a low light to me. But that also plays into the other problem that I had with this show, which is its pacing. I don't think this show was paced very well. It honestly felt like it was rushing to get to the conclusion of this season, mostly to build up for season 2, and because they knew the conclusion and the climax they were going to give you for season 1, and they just wanted to get there already. It felt like season 1 was the build up for season 2, and that was mostly all it was supposed to be, which is disappointing. I doubt that's what it was supposed to be, but with how fast paced this season felt, I mean, it felt like the whole thing was probably 3 days worth of in reality time. Things just happened because they had to happen, and there was literally a scene about that. Again, not trying to spoil anything. We're towards the tail end of this, so many of you have probably clicked off, but the ones who have stayed, I'm still gonna do my best not to spoil something. But Richter basically goes Super Saiyan at one point, and another character asks him, well, how did you do that? And his response is along the lines of, well, it needed to happen. There are things that need to be built up, there are things that need to be earned, and things that need to be achieved. And this is something that, like the character said, it needed to happen. Whereas as a viewer, as myself, it needed to be built up, it needed to be earned, it needed to be achieved, it needed to be something that I could see coming because of character progression, instead of just a momentary, well, this is the time that it needs to happen. That's one of the reasons why this season felt so rushed to me, because in a lot of areas there wasn't a whole lot of development. Characters just show up because they need to show up at that time. They're in their place because that's where they need to be for the story to keep going, versus it feeling like, I don't want to say incidental, but there was actual time and planning for these two things to occur and happen, versus boom, here it is so we can move on. Boom, here it is so we can move on. Boom, here it is so we can move on. on, which is unfortunate because again, this wasn't a bad show, but it felt like a rushed season with a villain that feels half-baked. Maybe season 2 will be better. I don't know if it's getting a season 2, but my assumption is it will. So maybe season 2 will be better because season 2 was what they're actually planning to do. Because in all honesty, a part of me feels like they have the story for season 2 and beyond, and they said, oh wait, we need to get to season 2 first. What are we gonna do? That's not to say this is thrown together, but it did definitely feel rushed. That part of the show, definitely disappointing to me. Again, I don't think it's a bad show. I think it did need the 2 extra episodes that the last 2 seasons of Castlevania got. Instead of being 8 episodes, I think it really needed to be 10. That way it wouldn't feel as rushed. We could have had villain development, and we could have had more character and plot development, drawn it out a little more so that it's not like a weekend adventure. That seems like the whole point of the first season was just to get to the last 20 seconds of episode 8. Again, does that mean it's bad? No. But as far as season 1 goes, probably the same 7 out of 10 that it has on IMDb. Whereas the first Castlevania should have a 10 out of 10 because it's fantastic. Was this a step down? A little bit, a little disappointing. I was expecting a little more, wanted a little more, but it wasn't bad. I don't think it's not worth watching if you're a fan of Castlevania. I just personally didn't enjoy it as much as I did the original series. So we'll see what season 2 has in store, but I think season 2 would be much better. We'll definitely do a spoiler talk on the season 1 of Castlevania Nocturne on the podcast, so don't forget to check that out. It'll be on the YouTube channel also, but you can always go and listen to it on any podcast app if you want. Other than that, like and subscribe, and I'll see all of you in the next one.